What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 188 of the Masterclass podcast. My name is still Cam. His name is always Dave, and we are back yet again. And, I'm happy to be here, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here as well.
Good. You answered correctly.
Good.
It is a lovely Tuesday evening in mid-July. I don't know how July's been in Kansas, Dave, but here it's been quite mild, and I am thankful to the Lord above for that.
It was 76 yesterday.
We
It
were
was a little bit warmer today, but
Our lows were in the upper 50s for like the last 3 days.
oh my gosh.
It was amazing. And I know everyone that loves summer here, like I have one friend here who is always cold, and she has a hoodie that just says I'm absolutely freezing on the front of it. And it's like, you ever see like someone with a piece of clothing that you're like, there's no more perfect thing that expresses who you are. And when I saw her wearing it the first time, I quite literally laughed out loud for a solid 10 seconds because I was like, if I had seen that in a store, I would have purchased it and given it to her as a gift because it's that priceless and that accurate. So I know that she is among many other people here not enjoying the very temperate weather, but
that would be nice.
August is around the corner, so it's about to get real nasty real quick.
Yes.
Dave, can I tell you a secret that you already know? It's
Sure.
not a secret to you. It's a secret to our listeners. I got in a car accident a couple weeks ago while I was driving home from the babysitter's house with my 4.5-year-old in the back seat, and a local gentleman was not paying attention and tried to cross the road from a stop sign and drove into my driver's door and set all of the side curtain airbags ablaze.
Oh my.
Which turns out real loud. Everyone was okay, including my daughter, which was the most important thing. She was freaked out, but she was fine. And it took the insurance company 2 whole weeks to decide to total the car, which for many reasons I was very okay with. Not necessarily the time length, but the fact that I no longer have that vehicle makes me happy. But I get my new car on Thursday, Dave.
Very exciting.
And it is a car that I have wanted, and I kid you not, since I was like 10 or 12. So I feel very excited and blessed that, because it's just a possession, right? And cars, of all possessions, they're depreciating assets. Like, they are just money pits by definition, unless you hold on to them long enough and get lucky that they become classics and somehow manage to keep a car in good condition for 40 or 50 years, right? Like, they are money pits, to insure, to own, to fuel, all of that stuff. But this particular vehicle, I remember seeing, so it's a BMW 3 Series. So even saying that out loud, I feel like a total, like, like my dad's reaction was, holy bleep, good. Like, it's like, you have a vehicle like this and people just assume lots of things about you. Like, I don't pay rent. I live for free because the church owns my house. So, I can have a nice vehicle, which is great, and I'm grateful for it. But I remember someone down the street growing up had a mid-90s BMW M3. It was all white, and it was back when it was super boxy. Like, the back spoiler was a perfect rectangle, and like it had the side skirts and the white rims, and it was just like this boxy little sports car. And I fell in love with it. And while I do not have an M3 because they are both economically and ecologically very, very unwise, I do get the pleasure of picking up my vehicle on Thursday in 2 days, and get to fulfill a boyhood dream. Whether that's good or not, I haven't yet decided, but that's what's happening.
So the BMW that you just described,
The boxy 1990s M3.
Mm-hmm. That is one of the cars that you just described in terms of holding on to one. So it's an E30
Mm-hmm.
for their model. Those go for six figures now.
Yeah, dude, they were. I mean, like, I can
And they
still.
were completely ahead of their time in terms of, and they're at one point they were not that expensive, but they
Dude, I
have
can still.
skyrocketed.
I can picture it in my mind still, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it was just the pinnacle of the time. It was such a good looking car, and it just looked like it could turn, do a 180 in a second, and then just beat you off the line. It was just, it was a
Yeah,
mean little four door. I loved it.
well, this one's a two-door.
Oh, maybe it was I don't remember that. Because
And
you can get a 3 Series. Most of the M3s are all two doors. You're right. You're right.
well, back then they were, but this one is $98,500.
That's crazy.
It's in Denver, Colorado.
I did not pay anywhere near that amount of money.
Well, and those cars new in 1990. Well, they might have been a $30,000 car back then, but yeah, it's insane. And that's like one of those cars that like in my life, if I had known, like I could have easily afforded one at the right time, kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, had you known, right? That's all
Right.
all
That's
investments,
the key.
right? Had I known that Bitcoin was going to go bonkers in the winter, then I would have. But
Yeah.
anyways, it's just I have been, the reason I bring it up is I have been very somber lately about life events in the past, and I just, not all of the things going on in my life for whatever it's worth, which may be very little. There's just something that I'm looking forward to and excited about and feel blessed with coming up. So I wanted to try and counterbalance some of my melancholy nature the past few episodes with the fact that something that I'm looking forward to and am excited about, and again, feel very blessed to have the opportunity to do is happening. So that's all. It wasn't like I'm bragging or anything like that. It was just like I've been listening back to the last few episodes to edit and to post and all that sort of stuff. Like, man, dude, life is not that bad. There are certain aspects of it that suck, but like overall, life is good for the most part. So, anyways,
Yes.
that's the motivation behind sharing that. It's just like, God is good. And even if I didn't have the opportunity for this vehicle, God would still be good. But it's a highlight for me. And I wanted to share that and not always just be the Debbie Downer. So, anyways,
Cool.
Dave, are you good?
Mhm.
Things are well?
I'm good. Things are well.
All right. Very good. We are going to continue on in Hebrews. We're going to start chapter 10 tonight. And the first section covers 18 verses, but we're just going to go through the first 7 tonight because 18 just felt like way too much to cover in an episode. And we want to make sure that what this passage is talking about gets adequate time and discussion on, because it's quite important. Again, the headers in the Bible were added by editors, so take that for what you will. But the header here for chapter 10 is Christ's sacrifice once for all. So we're talking about the biggest event in the history of history. So we don't want to gloss over it. We want to give it the amount of attention that it's due. So that's that. Would you like to do the honors, sir?
For since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sin? But in these sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, "Sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body have you prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure." Then I said, "Behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written of me in the scroll of the book."
Right. Thank you. So I actually think there's quite a bit to talk about here.
Uh-huh.
Like, if we really dive into it. And it starts right away, right? The law has but a shadow of the good things to come
Right.
instead of the true form of these realities. And if I remember correctly, that's sort of a reference to what we talked about last episode, where it starts in like verse 23. Thus, it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices. So, this is a carrying on of Jesus being the high priest of high priests and replacing what was but sort of like a shadow or a prefiguration, if that's even a word, of what was to come, right? So the law has but a shadow of the good things to come instead of the true form of these realities. And that's like, and you think about the law ruled everything that the Israelites did. Like
Yep.
it dictated everything they did and how they did it and why they did it and when they did it and who did it, where, like all of that stuff. If you go back and look, at the Pentateuch, it is painstakingly detailed about how all of this should take place and when and where and again by whom. And you think of all of that was but a shadow of what was to come. And that one person could fully encapsulate the entirety of the law and replace it by his sacrifice. That starts to kind of like, I hopefully broaden our perspectives as to what Jesus was actually here to do. Now, I'm not an Israelite or a Hebrew or a Jew. I didn't grow up following the Old Testament law, but I have studied it, and I have, taken the tests and read the books and gotten the degrees and all of that sort of stuff. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like, knowing all that I do know, to grow up in a place where that level of detail and attention and what's the word? Religiosity of following it would have felt like. I mean, it's almost militaristic in a sense, with the precision and the regimenting and all of that, right? And then one guy shows up and fulfills the whole thing. Like, I often wonder, like, why there were Jews back then that didn't accept Jesus for who he was. Well, I get it. How could one guy fulfill everything that our people have lived to fulfill for the past however many centuries? You're going to tell me one guy from Nazareth? Can anything good from Nazareth actually come? Like, you begin to see the audacity of what God accomplished through Jesus, who grew up in a backwater town in a backwater place of the world, to fulfill this just gargantuan law process, and we get to it later, right? That like the law was built to make this point that we couldn't be fulfilled by these people. But anyways, that's where my brain goes when I first start this, is just like the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, because that was its point, and Jesus is pointing us to the good things that are to come, because he's fulfilled the shadow with a real living being and he's leading us towards something. And it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good way to tie a bow on that. That's just kind of where my brain's at. A real preacher would have a way to tie that up, but I'm not a real preacher, so.
Well, and you're also not preparing a sermon, so
Fair point.
You're just talking. So
Sometimes too much.
no, it it is it's just so interesting, and that's I guess that's where my mind went, and I guess maybe to just put a bow on it is we're talking about the core thing that everybody lives for, what their world revolves around. I mean, it is how you do life. It's how you do government. It's how you are ruled. It's
Absolutely.
It's every part of who you are. If you are, a Jew, if you were, God, one of God's chosen people, and now the writer of Hebrews, which I think he's accurate, is basically saying, yeah, that's just a shadow. So this central thing, and so, yeah, I mean, there is that element of, if everything that your world revolves around, then this guy comes along, is like, yeah, do away with all that. It doesn't really matter. And it just,
but it's more than just that, right? It's not,
oh, sure.
It's not just just forget it. No. I have fulfilled the entirety. Everything that our entire people group has struggled to understand, to work through, to process, to achieve. I'm going to fulfill the entirety of it and more.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could totally see how some people were like, this guy is crazy. He's a psycho, like that. We need to kill him because he's undermining what we stand for. There's no possible way. Like, I can start to understand why the rulers did what they did.
Yeah. And just the anger to actually literally have somebody crucified because of this, yeah, a lot of emotion, a lot of investment in the law, a lot of just dependence on, and they probably, in a lot of ways, the purpose of the law is to point out sin, not to remove it. But they are certainly operating from a premise of it does remove sin. Like, it is effective, right?
Well, and yeah, like when something becomes so integral to your way of life, whether it's, Jews in Jesus' time and the law, or pick your political position in modern day times, and someone tries to take that from you and say that it's not relevant anymore, you see how people react violently and without reason and purely emotional. And we've seen that over the last, let's just, be short sighted and say 6 years in this country, where certain, quote unquote values have been attacked from one side or the other. And they're so fundamental to what your life is built on that when someone tries to say that they're wrong or, what's the word? Discredit them, or to like, people react violently.
Yep.
And so, so you get why the people reacted the way they did that were against Jesus. Doesn't mean they were right at all, but you can begin to understand the human side of it, of like, I get why they would act this way.
Yep.
All right, so that's the first half of verse 1. So we'll just start from the beginning, right? For since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Okay. So this concept, the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year. He says this again later on in verse 3. He's making a point here. There's a reason you have to repeat these sacrifices. There's a reason why one sacrifice isn't enough. There's a reason why this is a ritual. There's a reason why you were consistently over and again making the same sacrifices for the same sins for the same people.
Yep.
Because these sacrifices don't solve the problem. They are a bloody, gruesome reminder of the reality of your sinfulness. And like we talked about a couple episodes ago, as gross and nasty as that is, I wonder if it wouldn't be beneficial for us to have that drastic of a visual to remind us,
Mm-hmm.
modern day Americans, especially us white suburbanites that have it very easy, to see the gruesome nature of our sinfulness, where we
Right.
don't get to hide behind comfort or money or education or white privilege or whatever label you want to throw on stuff, right? Like, would it be beneficial for me to see that sort of graphic visualization of the disgusting nature of my sin that Jesus died for willingly? Now, it's easy to say that now, and with all things that in repetition becomes numbness, right? Comes
Mm-hmm.
desensitivity. So who knows? If I start seeing that when I'm 2, maybe by the time I'm 12, it's like, oh, just another dead goat. Ha ha ha. Whatever. I don't know. Um, but there there is just this idea that keeps coming back to me is like we are so like we hammer so much in church on the love of God and the grace of God and the mercy of God, all of which are so true and biblical. But how often is that balanced with the fact that the reason Jesus died was to satisfy the wrath and judgment of God?
Mm-hmm.
I just like there has to be a balance there, right? Because if God is all love, then Jesus didn't need to die. But there needed to be a payment for the sin. There had to be a just end to our sinfulness, our evil. And, you know, I'll shut up after this, but like, I think we could use a healthy dose of reminding us of the fact that our sin is appalling and way worse than we would think. And there's, again, I'll shut up after this, I promise. Tim, there's a quote from Tim Keller that I'll probably butcher here, but I've mentioned many times before, right? Like that our sin is deeper and more grave and more terrible than we could ever imagine. But God's love for us is deeper and greater than we could ever dare to hope. So like
Mm-hmm.
we and so part of this is by not by being afraid to look or not even trying to look at the depth of our sin, we are preventing ourselves from a further deeper understanding of the depth of God's forgiveness, right? And so I think we have to lean into the fact that yes, I sin. Yes, I have, terrible thoughts, and yes, I want to do things that dishonor God, because we have to be okay. We have to be right. We have to be a good person. And, the more I read scripture and the more that I listen and read other people that are further along in their journey than I am, it's like that is so not what the Bible wants us to do. Like we don't have to get well before you see the doctor. Go
Mm-hmm.
to the doctor because you're sick, and the doctor is there to take care of you and wants to take care of you, wants to heal you, wants to help you put you on a healthier path. And I just I I can't help but wonder, are we doing ourselves a disservice by sheltering ourselves against the depth and gravity of our sin, and in so doing, hiding the depth and reality of God's love towards his people. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I think the first thing with this is when we think of sin and being a good person and that, I really think our focus, our audience, who we are thinking of when we talk about being a good person and not sinning is what other people think of us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really think that's our focus, because the reality is God knows exactly who we are and he knows exactly, you know, what we think and how selfish and self-centered and all that we are. And so, yeah, when you talk about the, you know, the realization of our depravity and how
That's
deep
the
that
word I
really
was
goes.
looking for. Yes, depravity. That's such a it's such a good word.
Well, it's funny because I would have said you said it because that
Oh,
was because like I said, I go, well, like you said, depravity. Um, but yeah, and again, we can't even begin to comprehend just how intense that is. And going back to the sacrifices, and it's continual every year, and seeing it, and just, you know, there really is an image there that we sanitize our world in so many ways as much as we possibly can. You know, I don't want to be crass, but you know, our bathroom doors are closed and we flush the toilet and never have to see that kind of stuff. And, you know, we even put our old folks into homes where they can die. And, you know, just so much of the messiness of life has really been sterilized and sanitized by our world. And in some ways, rightfully so, rightfully, you know, uh, but yeah, I would say that, so there's much I'm grateful for in my law enforcement career, but honestly, that's probably been one of those things that will stick with me, is just, um, you get to see some of that, you know, like you talk about whitewash suburbia, it you experience so much of the reality of just how disgusting one human being can be towards another human being, and especially how disgusting you can be towards another human being that you should be protecting or taking care of, whether it be a spouse or a child, or, you know, whatever it may be. And um, so yeah, I guess my thought is just I agree with the depravity and what the living and experiencing these sacrifices would do in terms of a reminder of our sin. So that's my thought.
it's a good thought, Dave. All right, verse 2. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sins? All right, so this is just a further point from the first verse, that these sins or these sacrifices had to be made because they were not enough. They were
Right.
merely symbolic, if we could be so bold.
Yeah. And, you know, that would no longer have any consciousness of sin. I think that's never really noticed that before. And that really stood out to me, of just consciousness of sin.
Well, and that,
And
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
just concept that we could no longer have any.
So that begs a question, though, doesn't it? If Jesus' sacrifice was once for all and conquered sin, why do you and I have a consciousness of sin?
Yeah. Yes. And
I mean, like, if we're going to analyze the text, we have to
Right.
call out the questions that maybe we don't want to bring up, because the answer is not easy. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like I could give you the party line, that the whole now but not yet, the kingdom
Right.
has been
Yeah.
initiated but it's not been fulfilled, and that's what the Holy Spirit is here for. And we are being made in the likeness of Christ within time, but God exists without time, and judgment has already happened outside of time, but we are in time, so we have to wait for it to happen. And all of the Christopher Nolan style time warping in the movie. But like, this is the point he makes. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sins? Well, Jesus died once. We've all been cleansed because of that, but we still do have an awareness, a consciousness of sin, and we still do sin. And so that verse is a problem for me, that I don't have a an answer to. And I'm not going to try and just rely on what I just said, because I don't think it answers that question, right? And so this is one of the areas of the scripture where, like, there are days when I'm just like, if I'm being frank, if I'm being honest, what if this is all just a bunch of bull?
Sure.
What if
Oh,
this is all, what if this is all just some big story that got out of hand and somehow, in some way, caught on? It was the first viral book, back in the day. What if it's all just a story?
right.
And all of the folklore around who wrote it and when it was written, and it all just wound up coincidentally lining up, all that stuff. Now, do I believe that? No. But are there moments when I read things where I'm just like, oh gosh, I don't know the answer to that. And that really makes me wonder. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is one of those.
Yeah. Um. So yes, mine lately has just been, and it's just funny because if you say things out loud, you feel like you're going to be Looney Tunes. But like, I've lately just had this whole like, I can accept that there's a possibility that like we're just a big petri dish, you know, that like aliens doing their science experiment. And it's kind of like, okay, now we're going to create this big ball that they live on. Let's give them things like water and wood and minerals and alloys. And let's see if they can figure out how to make stuff from it. And, it's just like, and here's the thing, that is plausible, like, and you can go any different direction that you want with that.
We've all seen The Matrix. Like,
yeah. So and then back to this, but back to the verse. I think there is an element of, and I know even as I say this, it's not going to be completely, but, I do believe that while I am aware of my sin, in terms of like a consciousness of sin, I truly like, so, on the flip side of having your doubts and the places that our mind wanders to, when I'm in scripture, when I'm in walking with God, when I'm in that place where things are just, in harmony, like there's really not doubt for me, like I have an assurance of my salvation that I can't completely explain. I don't have to wonder, did that bull getting slaughtered do enough? Did it cover it? And
was there enough blood?
And it's been 11 months and 15 days. And I got a lot of sin, and I need these next 15 days to really hurry up to get here, because if I die in the 11th month, 15th day, I might not make it to heaven. But if we got that bull slaughtered, I think I'm good again. It's, I don't even know if I'm articulating that well, but I do think there's an element of, I have a freedom from that sin of not being just consumed by that. And I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's what I don't know, in my mind, seem to rectify that. So
yeah, I get it. Which actually kind of leads quite well into the next verse. But in these sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year, which you just said, right? Like, oh my gosh, it's December 15th. I got to get through these next 16 days to get to that, whatever, right? Or, at whatever point in the year they did I don't remember.
Right. I don't know either.
Who knows? It's probably a Tuesday. That's always the joke. But in these sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. And if that is not one of the strongest statements in the entire Bible,
right,
considering what it implies,
right,
about the Old Testament,
yes,
I mean, that's a strong, definitive, declarative statement. It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins.
Right. So there's the underlying question, right? So what does that mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's then why did they do it? And again, God is what's the word here? He loves a good word picture. And sometimes those word pictures are real bloody and very graphic. But if you think about the way that God has interacted with humanity and has called humanity, it is very visual. It is very visceral. It is very much he built us. He made us in his image. So he knows what gets our attention. He didn't show up to Moses as a little cute butterfly. He was a burning bush. Obvious, right? They followed a smoke of pillar or a smoke of fire through the desert. Like when he showed his face, Moses' face glowed for how many days, right? Like Jesus calmed a storm by talking. He fed 5,000 people plus women and children with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Like he does things. He turned water into wine. Very visual, like captivating things. He didn't heal someone who had a cough. He healed people that had leprosy and blindness or could not walk.
Or were dead.
Or we're dead. Okay, touche, David. Let's just get right to the point. Like everything he did in that way had a bit of audaciousness to it, and building this entire system of sacrifices, whether it be ritualistic cleansing or the whole temple system and all of that, was to clearly illustrate a point. Right. There is a price to be paid for what you have done. That price will be paid. And guess what? All the bulls, all the goats, everything else that you've sacrificed isn't going to pay it. And you know what? You can't pay it. There's no way you could. And in fact, the only reason you even know that there's a debt to be paid is because I've told you that there is one to be paid. So the only reason you want to repay it is not because you have the capacity to understand the fact that there is one, but it's because I've opened your eyes and brought you back to life and told you there's a debt to be paid. But don't worry, I got it. And you just that I think really does, as much as humanity has accomplished and as intelligent as people can be. Like you think about some of the stuff that people have pulled off.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's remarkable.
It really is. Yep.
My computer is wirelessly transmitting not only my audio, but my face in real time to you 9 hours away by car to your laptop wirelessly.
And we can have a conversation with no delay.
In real time with no lag in 1080p crystal clear HD That's insane. And yet, in all of our intelligence and all of our wherewithal and all of our ingenuity, there's nothing we could do to close this gap.
Right.
And we couldn't even know there was a gap. And that's the point of the law. It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away the sins, is no matter how many you kill, even no matter how correctly you do it, no matter how many rules you follow, it doesn't get you where you need to do. All it does is prove the point that I wanted you to understand.
Yeah.
Is that a sacrifice has to be made and you cannot make it. So I will make it on your behalf at full cost to me. Even though you are the offender, you are the one that has sinned against me, I will show you what it costs in only the small fraction that you could possibly understand what it costs, and that I will bear the full cost, which you could never understand, at full cost to me, so that we can be together again. And that's where it says in verse 5, consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body have you prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written for me in the scroll of the book. And, I mean, shoot, Dave. That's rather poetic, don't you think? It's like, I mean, what's a good analogy? I'm thinking of like bringing in the closer, you know, the coach coming out, tapping, give me the righty, you know, like we've seen the game as it was. The rules have been established. We've all been toiling, and in the end, there's a plot twist. We're bringing in someone that no one saw coming. I mean, to the point that we talked about earlier, that so many of the Jews in the day not only didn't believe in Jesus, but were so offended by what he was saying and doing that they plotted to murder him with zero evidence to hold against him. That's how offended they were by what he was saying and doing, because it was not at all what they expected the Messiah to do. And like, if that doesn't just show you what our base instincts and, you know, depravity is like, these are people that knew the law upside down, left and right, memorized the entire Old Testament. Think about that.
Yeah.
How many verses in the Old Testament do you have memorized? Maybe 3? They had every single one of them memorized. And they couldn't see Jesus for what he was.
Yeah.
And yet, I'll read it again. Consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body have you prepared for me, and burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written of me in the scroll of the book. He showed up to be the sacrifice.
Yep.
Willingly doing so. Which ties in with the entire book of Hebrews so far, that he was going to be the high priest of all high priests. He was going to end the cycle. He was going to be the sacrifice. He was going to be the one that would represent us to God for eternity. That this yearly cycle that is referenced twice here in these passages of having to do the sacrifices over and over and over again, ultimately for no point other than proving the fact that we could not solve the problem. And Jesus is going to solve the problem once for all people. Gets me excited, Dave. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I'm, trying to remain reserved a little bit. So that's the first 7 verses of chapter 10 of Hebrews.
Very good.
Super good. Maybe not our podcast, but the verses are great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Self-deprecation aside, it's just
no, you're right. Yeah.
It's very good. It's very, very good. Any other thoughts? Or should we send this one off to the old internet?
I think we're good.
Sweet. All right. Well, folks, thanks again for your time and your attention. Still really cool that people we don't know listen to the show. Like that, it's been 6.5 years of us doing this, and still really cool, and really awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. Show notes again are in your podcast player of choice, or you can go to supermegacorp.net/masterclass/188, and they'll be there as well. And there's links there for all the ways to get in touch. Well, I guess until next time, I don't know. Don't waste your time sacrificing any more cows.
You're good.
Yeah, it frees up your weekend, I think.
Yeah. Now, if you want to have a barbecue, that's fine.
Okay, real quick, Dave. I know we're ending the show. Do you know Traeger wood pellet grills?
Yes.
The church may have purchased one, and it may be stored. It may be stored in my garage, and I may have smoked some barbecue chicken breasts earlier in a steak the other day. I did. Oh my gosh, David. It's incredible. It's the best chicken I've ever made in my life. And the steak was incredible too. I overcooked it because I was nervous, and it was still amazing.
That's cool. Very cool.
Anyways, folks, Traeger grills, incredibly expensive. The best grill you can probably ever buy.
Yeah, they're good.
I made my daughter some Aldi hot dogs on it the first night. Just like, you get like an 8-pack of Aldi hot dogs for like $4 or whatever. The best hot dogs I've ever had in my life.
That's cool.
Simply because they were smoked on the wood pellet grill. I'm just saying. It's an investment. It's glorious. Anyways, I should have ended before I talked about that, but Dave brought up
barbecue.
I've got it on the mind and in the belly. So, anywho's, we'll be back next time. Adios.
Bye.